In the closing years of the 17th century, the village of Salem stood at the edge of the known world. Beyond its fields and forests lay wilderness, war, and uncertainty. Beyond its theology lay eternal damnation. Salem was not merely a geographic place, but a moral experiment, a community founded on the belief that God had chosen it for a divine purpose. The people who lived there believed their success or failure would be read as a judgment from heaven itself. Every storm, every illness, every misfortune was scrutinized for meaning. Nothing was accidental. Everything was a sign. This way of seeing the world shaped every aspect of life. The Puritans of New England believed humanity was inherently sinful, and that only constant vigilance could keep corruption at bay. The devil, they believed, was not a symbolic force, but a living, intelligent adversary who walked among them, seeking the vulnerable and the proud alike. To the people of Salem, evil was not distant or abstract. It was personal. It could speak through neighbors, children, even ministers, and it could hide in plain sight. Salem in 1692 was already a community under strain. Decades of hardship had left scars both visible and invisible. The land itself was harsh, demanding relentless labor for survival. Winters were long and unforgiving. Crops failed without warning. Disease spread quickly, and medical knowledge was limited. Death was a frequent visitor, especially among children. In such a world, grief was common and fear was practical. Beyond the daily struggle for survival, Salem was shaped by conflict. The colony had been embroiled in frontier wars that brought violence uncomfortably close. Raids and massacres along the northern borders sent refugees southward, carrying stories of terror that circulated through villages like Salem. These stories did not fade with time. They lingered, feeding a collective sense that danger was everywhere and safety fragile. Within Salem itself, unity was more myth than reality. The village was divided by class, by geography, by theology, and by old grudges that refused to die. Some families prospered, owning fertile land and exerting influence in local affairs. Others struggled, pushed to the margins both economically and socially. Disputes over property lines, inheritance, and grazing rights simmered beneath the surface, unresolved and deeply personal. Religion, meant to bind the community together, often intensified these divisions. Puritanism demanded conformity, not only of belief, but of behavior. Church attendance was mandatory, and moral conduct was constantly observed. Deviations were noted, remembered, and sometimes punished. Reputation mattered profoundly. A whisper of impropriety could follow a person for years, shaping how neighbors viewed every action. At the center of this fragile equilibrium stood the church and its minister. In Salem Village, that minister was Reverend Samuel Parris, a man whose presence would prove catalytic. Parris was strict, uncompromising, and deeply concerned with threats to spiritual purity. His sermons emphasized sin, damnation, and the ever-present danger of Satan's influence. For some, his preaching was a necessary warning. For others, it was oppressive and alienating. Parris's relationship with his congregation was troubled from the beginning. Disputes over his salary, his authority, and even ownership of the parsonage created factions within the village. Some parishioners supported him fiercely, others resented him deeply. These divisions were not merely theological. They were social and political, shaping alliances that would later re-emerge in deadly ways. It was into this environment, tense, fearful, divided, that the first strange events occurred. They did not begin in a public square or courtroom, but in the private space of the minister's home. What initially appeared as childish illness or misbehavior soon became something far more ominous. When young girls began to scream, convulse, and claim unseen tormentors, Salem did not respond with skepticism. It responded with recognition. The behaviors matched what people believed they knew about demonic affliction. The community already believed witches existed. The only question was where they were hiding. This is one of the most unsettling truths about the Salem witch trials. The accusations did not require extraordinary imagination. They required only the activation of existing beliefs. The idea that witches lived among them was not radical. It was orthodox. The laws of the colony explicitly recognized witchcraft as a capital crime. Ministers had written extensively about Satan's strategies and the danger of secret conspiracies against God's people. Once the possibility of witchcraft was raised, it spread with terrifying speed. Fear did not need to be invented, it needed only permission. Children's fits became evidence. Dreams became testimony. Personal grudges found moral justification. Long-standing resentments were reframed as spiritual battles between good and evil. The tragedy of Salem lies not only in the deaths that followed, but in how quickly ordinary safeguards collapsed. Legal standards that would seem essential today, material evidence, reliable witnesses, the presumption of innocence, were weakened or discarded entirely. In their place rose a system driven by fear, authority, and religious certainty. Neighbors testified against neighbors. Children accused parents. Husbands were separated from wives. The jail filled, not with criminals caught in the act, but with people trapped by rumor and suspicion. And all the while, many believed they were doing God's work. What makes the Salem witch trials endure in collective memory is not their scale alone, but their familiarity. The people involved were not monsters. They were farmers, ministers, children, judges, individuals acting within a framework that told them they were righteous. Their failure was not cruelty for its own sake, but the inability to question the system that gave fear legitimacy. The events of 1692 did not arise from ignorance alone. They arose from conviction, from the belief that the world was divided into absolute good and absolute evil, and that hesitation in the face of evil was itself a sin. Once that belief took hold, doubt became dangerous and mercy suspicious. Salem's story is therefore not simply about witches or superstition. It is about how communities respond to crisis. It is about what happens when fear is sanctified and authority goes unchecked. It is about the thin line between vigilance and paranoia, between faith and fanaticism. The village believed it was defending itself against Satan. In reality, it was unraveling itself from within. The Salem witch trials would leave 19 people dead by hanging, one crushed beneath stones, and countless others scarred by imprisonment, loss, and shame. Long after the gallows were dismantled, the questions remained. How could this happen? And why did so many participate? To answer those questions, one must look beyond the courtroom and into the deeper currents of belief, conflict, and fear that shaped Salem long before the first accusation was spoken aloud. Long before the first accusation of witchcraft echoed through Salem Village, the community had been shaped by a worldview that left little room for ambiguity. The Puritans who settled Massachusetts did not see themselves as immigrants seeking opportunity. They saw themselves as a chosen people fleeing corruption to build a godly society. Their experiment was spiritual before it was political, and every aspect of daily life reflected that priority. Puritan theology rested on the belief that humanity was deeply flawed. Sin was not an occasional lapse, but a permanent condition. Salvation was uncertain, granted only to a select few by God's grace alone. This belief produced a culture of constant self-examination. People searched their own hearts and the behavior of their neighbors for signs of election or damnation. Public morality became a collective responsibility. To tolerate sin was to invite divine punishment upon the entire community. The devil occupied a central place in this worldview. He was not a symbolic representation of temptation, but a literal being with agency, intelligence, and intent. Ministers warned constantly that Satan sought to undermine God's work in New England, targeting the faithful with deception and despair. The wilderness surrounding the colonies was believed to be his domain, a place of darkness pressing in against the fragile light of civilization. Salem's proximity to that wilderness intensified these fears. The village lay on the edge of the frontier, where forests stretched for miles and threats, real and imagined, seemed to emerge without warning. For decades, colonial settlements had faced violent conflict with Native American tribes, often fueled by imperial wars between England and France. These wars were not distant events, but personal catastrophes. Families lost loved ones. Homes were destroyed. Survivors fled south, bringing their grief and terror with them. Many of the individuals who would later participate in the witch trials had lived through these conflicts. Some had seen villages burned. Others had endured captivity or lost children to violence. Trauma was widespread, but there was no language for it. Instead, fear found expression through religion. Suffering was interpreted as a test from God or an attack by Satan. The boundary between psychological distress and spiritual warfare was thin. At the same time, Salem Village was embroiled in its own internal struggles. The village was technically part of Salem Town, a wealthier and more established port community several miles away. This relationship bred resentment. Villagers felt neglected by town authorities while still being taxed and governed by them. Efforts to gain independence, both politically and ecclesiastically, were long and contentious. The establishment of a separate church in Salem Village was meant to resolve some of these tensions, but it created new ones instead. Choosing a minister proved divisive. Reverend Samuel Parris, appointed in 1689, quickly became a polarizing figure. He was deeply committed to strict Puritan orthodoxy and intolerant of dissent. His sermons emphasized the dangers of moral laxity and the ever-present threat of Satan's influence. Parris's leadership style alienated many parishioners. He demanded full control over church matters and insisted on material support that some villagers resented. Disputes over his salary, firewood, and the deed to the parsonage escalated into bitter factionalism. The village split into supporters and opponents, each side viewing the other with suspicion. These divisions often aligned with deeper social and economic fault lines. Wealthier families tended to support Parris and his emphasis on order and authority. Poorer or more independent-minded villagers were more likely to oppose him. Old family rivalries resurfaced, now framed as moral or spiritual disagreements. Land disputes added another layer of tension. Salem Village was expanding, and land was both valuable and symbolic. Ownership conferred status, security, and influence. Conflicts over property boundaries, inheritance, and grazing rights were common and intensely personal. Lawsuits and grudges accumulated over years, sometimes decades. In such an environment, resentment did not dissipate. It hardened. People remembered slights, real or imagined. They cataloged offenses and waited for opportunities to assert moral superiority. When witchcraft accusations began, These grievances found an outlet that carried the weight of divine authority. Social expectations were rigid, particularly for women. Puritan society valued female piety, obedience, and domesticity. Women who were outspoken, argumentative, or economically independent often attracted suspicion. Widows without male protectors, women who inherited property, or those who relied on charity were especially vulnerable to criticism. Children, meanwhile, occupied a paradoxical position. They were believed to be born sinful and in need of strict discipline, yet also viewed as innocent vessels susceptible to corruption. When children claimed to be afflicted by witches, adults were inclined to believe them. To doubt a child's testimony was to risk ignoring a sign from God. The legal framework of the colony reinforced these beliefs. Witchcraft was a capital crime under English law, inherited by the colonies. Courts were empowered to prosecute it, and ministers often advised judges on theological matters. There was no clear separation between church and state. Religious doctrine shaped legal practice. Massachusetts had experienced witchcraft accusations before, but never on the scale seen in Salem. Earlier cases had been isolated and relatively restrained. What made Salem different was the convergence of so many destabilizing forces at once. War, political uncertainty, religious extremism, economic inequality, and unresolved personal conflict. Even the natural environment contributed to unease. Harsh winters, poor harvests, and outbreaks of disease were interpreted as signs of divine displeasure. Scientific explanations were limited, and randomness was an unsettling concept. It was far more comforting to believe that misfortune had a cause, and that the cause could be identified and punished. When the first accusations arose, they did not challenge the worldview of Salem's inhabitants. They confirmed it. The idea that witches were attacking children fit perfectly into existing beliefs about Satan's tactics. The notion that these witches were neighbors merely reinforced the belief that evil was insidious and hidden. What is striking, in retrospect, is how prepared Salem was for catastrophe. The trials did not require the invention of new fears, only the amplification of old ones. Every sermon about Satan, every unresolved grievance, every night spent fearing attack from the wilderness contributed to a culture primed for hysteria. Once the accusations began, they spread along the fault lines already present. Those aligned with Reverend Paris tended to believe the afflicted girls and support aggressive prosecution. Those opposed to him were more likely to find themselves accused. Old disputes over land and reputation resurfaced in the language of spiritual warfare. The trials thus became a distorted mirror of Salem's internal conflicts. They reflected not only fear of the supernatural, but fear of one another. Witchcraft provided a framework through which the community could express anger, envy, and resentment without acknowledging them as such. In this sense, the Salem witch trials were not an aberration, but an extreme manifestation of ordinary social dynamics operating under extraordinary stress. They revealed what can happen when belief systems discourage doubt, when authority validates fear, and when social tensions are left to fester unchecked. By the time the first children cried out against invisible tormentors, Salem was already standing on unstable ground. The accusations did not create the crisis. They ignited it. The world that produced the Salem witch trials was one in which certainty was prized over compassion and conformity over understanding. It was a world that believed righteousness required vigilance, even at the cost of mercy. And once that belief took hold, it would demand victims. The winter of 1692 settled heavily over Salem Village, its cold seeping into homes already burdened by unease. Snow blanketed the fields, isolating households and compressing daily life inward. Families gathered close to hearths, sharing stories, prayers, and fears. It was in this season of confinement and anxiety that the behavior of a few young girls began to disturb the fragile calm. The first signs appeared in the household of Reverend Samuel Parris. His daughter Elizabeth, known as Betty, was 9 years old. Her cousin Abigail Williams, 11, lived in the home as well. Like many children in Puritan households, they were expected to be obedient, restrained, and attentive to religious instruction. Childhood was not regarded as a time of carefree exploration, but as a period requiring discipline and spiritual guidance. At some point during the long winter evenings, the girls began engaging in small, forbidden amusements. They listened to stories told by Tituba, an enslaved woman of Caribbean origin who lived in the Parris household. Tituba's stories, whether folklore, memory, or invention, were perceived as exotic and unsettling by Puritan standards. She also participated in a simple fortune-telling game, using household items to predict future husbands. Such practices, though seemingly harmless, violated Puritan prohibitions against divination. Shortly thereafter, Betty Parris began exhibiting alarming symptoms. She screamed unexpectedly, threw objects, crawled under furniture, and complained of being bitten or pinched by unseen forces. Abigail soon displayed similar behavior. Their bodies twisted into unnatural contortions. Their voices rose in incoherent cries, and their fits seemed to come without warning. The household was thrown into confusion. Prayers were offered, discipline attempted, and ministers consulted. When these measures failed, a physician was summoned. Unable to identify a physical cause, he concluded that the girls were suffering from supernatural affliction. In the language of the time, they were under an evil hand. This diagnosis transformed a private family crisis into a communal threat. If the devil was at work, then Salem itself was in danger. The girls' behavior quickly became a subject of public scrutiny. Neighbors gathered to witness the fits, interpreting them through the lens of their religious beliefs. Soon, other girls began exhibiting similar symptoms. Ann Putnam Jr., the 12-year-old daughter of a prominent family, joined Betty and Abigail. So did Elizabeth Hubbard, Mary Walcott, Mercy Lewis, and others. Their fits followed a recognizable pattern: convulsions, screams, accusations of spectral torment, and sudden recoveries. The consistency of these behaviors reinforced the belief that something supernatural was occurring. The girls claimed they were being attacked by invisible figures. They described shapes hovering near them, hands choking them, teeth biting their flesh. These visions were vivid and terrifying. Adults listened closely, asking questions that guided the narratives. Each retelling grew more detailed, more convincing. Under pressure to identify their tormentors, the girls named individuals within the community. The first was Tituba. As an enslaved woman, foreign-born and socially isolated, she was an easy target. When questioned, she initially denied wrongdoing. But under intense interrogation and possibly physical abuse, she confessed. Tituba's confession was a turning point. She spoke of signing the devil's book, of flying through the night, of animal familiars that carried out evil deeds. Most importantly, she claimed she was not alone. There were others, she said, working for Satan within Salem. Her testimony provided a narrative framework that explained the girls' afflictions and justified further investigation. It also shifted the focus from isolated misbehavior to a broader conspiracy. Witchcraft was no longer an individual sin, it was an organized threat. The girls next accused Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. Good was a poor, homeless woman who begged for food and was known for her sharp tongue. Osborne was an elderly woman who had married her indentured servant and become embroiled in property disputes. Both women occupied marginal positions in Salem society and had long been subjects of gossip and disapproval. Their arrests were swift. They were examined in public, questioned aggressively, and jailed. During their examinations, the afflicted girls reacted violently in their presence, screaming and collapsing. These reactions were interpreted as confirmation of guilt. The accused protested their innocence, but their words carried little weight against the spectacle of the girls' suffering. As the examinations continued, the process took on a ritualistic quality. The girls would cry out, accuse, and convulse. Magistrates would nod gravely, asking leading questions. Spectators murmured prayers and judgments. Each session reinforced the belief that Salem was under siege. What is striking is how quickly the accusations expanded beyond the marginalized. Soon, respected members of the community were named. Martha Corey, a church member known for her intelligence and independence, was accused. Rebecca Nurse, elderly and deeply pious, followed. These accusations shocked the village, yet they did not stop the process. Instead, they heightened the sense that evil was deeply embedded, capable of disguising itself in virtue. The afflicted girls became central figures in Salem's social life. Their testimony was sought, their experiences deferred to, their reactions treated as authoritative. Children who otherwise would have been expected to remain silent now commanded the attention of ministers and magistrates. Their words had power, and that power shaped events. Whether the girls believed their own claims is a question that has haunted historians for centuries. Some may have been genuinely frightened, caught up in a shared delusion reinforced by adult validation. Others may have discovered, consciously or not, that their behavior granted them attention and authority otherwise denied. In a society where children had little voice, affliction became a means of expression. There were also clear social incentives. Accusing others diverted suspicion away from oneself. It aligned the accuser with the forces of good. It provided a framework for expressing anger, fear, or resentment without consequence. Once the pattern was established, deviating from it became risky. The community, for its part, was eager to believe. The girls' fits provided tangible evidence of an invisible enemy. Their suffering justified harsh measures. Their accusations resolved uncertainties by assigning blame. In a world that demanded moral clarity, the afflicted girls offered certainty. As the number of accused grew, so did the intensity of the proceedings. People were arrested at all hours, dragged from their homes, separated from families. Jails filled quickly, forcing authorities to use facilities in neighboring towns. Fear spread faster than reason. The afflicted girls were not isolated actors. They were embedded in a network of adult authority that shaped their behavior. Ministers interpreted their visions, magistrates recorded their testimony, and neighbors discussed their claims. Each layer reinforced the next, creating a feedback loop that was difficult to break. By the spring of 1692, Salem Village was transformed. The ordinary rhythms of life were disrupted. Trust eroded. Silence became dangerous. To question the girls was to risk suspicion. To defend the accused was to invite accusation. The trials had not yet reached their deadliest phase, but the foundation was firmly in place. The community had accepted the premise that invisible crimes could be proven by visible suffering. Once that premise took hold, there was no clear limit to how far the accusations could go. The afflicted girls had opened the door. What followed would reveal just how eager Salem was to walk through it. As the accusations multiplied and the jails filled, Salem entered a phase in which fear became formalized. What had begun as chaotic examinations in meeting houses and private homes was transformed into a legal process, but one profoundly shaped by theology and panic rather than restraint or reason. The courts that convened in 1692 were tasked with identifying invisible crimes, and to do so they embraced a form of evidence that all but guaranteed injustice. At the heart of this process was spectral evidence. In Puritan belief, witches could send their spirits, or specters, to torment victims while their physical bodies remained elsewhere. If an afflicted person claimed to see the apparition of an accused individual, this was accepted as proof that the accused had allied with the devil. The logic was circular, but compelling within the prevailing worldview. Satan would not impersonate an innocent person. Therefore, any specter must belong to the guilty. This belief removed the need for physical proof. No eyewitness to a crime was required, no tangible object, no corroborating testimony. A vision, a dream, or a fit could be elevated to the status of fact. The afflicted girls, already positioned as victims, became the primary witnesses in cases that would determine life or death. Courtroom proceedings were dramatic and chaotic. When an accused person entered the room, the girls often erupted into fits. They screamed, writhed, and pointed, claiming that the specter of the accused was attacking them in that very moment. Judges and spectators watched closely, interpreting every movement as evidence of supernatural influence. If the accused raised a hand, the girls might claim they were being struck. If the accused looked away, the girls might collapse. The courtroom became a stage on which guilt was performed in real time, with the afflicted girls as both actors and audience. Attempts by the accused to defend themselves often made matters worse. Protests of innocence were interpreted as lies inspired by Satan. Displays of anger or frustration were seen as signs of guilt. Calmness could be read as unnatural composure granted by the devil. There was no behavior that could reliably signal innocence. Physical examinations further eroded the presumption of innocence. Officials searched the bodies of the accused for marks believed to indicate a pact with Satan. These devil's marks could be anything from a mole to a scar to an area of skin that appeared insensitive to pain. Given the variability of the human body, such marks were easy to find and impossible to disprove. Even the natural processes of aging and illness became suspect. Elderly individuals with arthritic joints or blemished skin were especially vulnerable. Women who had given birth bore marks that examiners interpreted through a lens of superstition. Male bodies, though less frequently examined, were not exempt. Confessions became another pillar of the prosecution. Those who confessed were often spared execution, reinforcing the idea that admission of guilt was a path to mercy. However, confession required more than a simple acknowledgement. The accused were expected to provide detailed accounts of their pact with the devil, their methods, and the names of others involved. This expectation created a perverse incentive. Confessors named neighbors, family members, and acquaintances, expanding the web of accusation. Each new name added credibility to the idea of a widespread conspiracy. The trials fed on themselves, growing larger and more elaborate with each confession. Those who refused to confess faced harsher treatment. Their steadfast denial was interpreted as evidence of deep allegiance to Satan. Some were kept in chains, deprived of sleep, or subjected to repeated interrogations. The pressure was immense, and the psychological toll severe. Judges played a critical role in shaping the proceedings. The most influential among them believed deeply in the reality of witchcraft and the necessity of aggressive prosecution. They allowed spectral evidence without hesitation and discouraged challenges to its validity. In their view, the risk of allowing a witch to escape justice outweighed the risk of executing an innocent person. Legal safeguards were minimal. There was no right to counsel. The accused were expected to speak for themselves in an environment hostile to their claims. Rules of evidence were inconsistent and often ignored. Testimony that would have been dismissed in other contexts was accepted without question. The presence of clergy further blurred the line between law and religion. Ministers advised judges on theological matters, reinforcing the belief that the trials were a righteous endeavor. Sermons preached during the period emphasized obedience, vigilance, and the danger of skepticism. To doubt the court was to doubt God's will. As cases accumulated, the pace of the trials accelerated. The sheer number of accused made careful deliberation impractical. Efficiency replaced caution. Verdicts were delivered quickly, often based on patterns rather than individual circumstances. Once a person was accused, conviction became likely. The social dynamics of the village were reflected in the courtroom. Those with fewer allies were more easily condemned. Those who challenged authority or deviated from social norms faced greater scrutiny. Old disputes resurfaced in testimony, recast as evidence of malice or spiritual corruption. Some accused attempted to challenge the logic of spectral evidence, arguing that the devil could impersonate innocent people. This argument struck at the heart of the court's reasoning, and judges were uneasy with it. If accepted, it would undermine nearly every case. As a result, such objections were often dismissed or ignored. The afflicted girls, meanwhile, were treated as instruments of truth. Their youth and suffering granted them moral authority. Any attempt to question their sincerity was viewed as cruel or dangerous. The possibility that they might be mistaken, manipulated, or influenced by one another was rarely considered. As the summer of 1692 approached, the machinery of justice in Salem had become a machine of fear. The courts did not merely reflect the hysteria of the community, they amplified it. Legal proceedings gave structure and legitimacy to panic, transforming rumor into sentence. Yet even within this system, cracks began to appear. Some observers were troubled by the reliance on invisible evidence. Others were disturbed by the growing number of respectable citizens accused. A few ministers urged caution, warning that zeal could lead to error. These doubts, however, struggled to gain traction. The momentum of the trials was immense, driven by fear, belief, and institutional authority. To stop the process would require confronting the possibility that the courts themselves were wrong, a notion almost unthinkable in a society that equated law with divine order. The collapse of justice in Salem was not sudden. It was gradual, marked by small compromises that accumulated over time. Each decision to accept spectral evidence, each confession coerced, each objection dismissed, contributed to a system in which innocence had little meaning. By the time the first executions took place, the legal foundation of the trials was already deeply flawed. The courtroom, once a place of communal judgment, had become a theater of terror. The question was no longer whether the system was just, but how many lives it would claim before it was stopped. The first execution took place on a warm June day in 1692, marking a grim transition from accusation to irreversible consequence. Until that moment, the terror of Salem had been largely theoretical, confined to jail cells, courtrooms, and whispered fears. The hanging transformed suspicion into death, and in doing so, it bound the community to the path it had chosen. Bridget Bishop was the first to die. She had long stood apart from the strict expectations of Puritan womanhood. Outspoken, defiant, and known for her unconventional behavior, she was an easy target in a society that equated conformity with virtue. Her conviction relied heavily on spectral testimony and reputation. When she was led to the gallows, the message was unmistakable. The court was prepared to kill. The execution did not quell the hysteria. It intensified it. If the courts had acted, then the threat must be real. Each death reinforced the belief that Salem was purging itself of evil. Fear deepened, and accusations continued to pour in. In July, 5 more were hanged, including Rebecca Nurse. Her execution marked a turning point in public perception. Nurse was 71 years old, deeply religious, and widely respected. Many in the community had signed petitions attesting to her good character. When the jury initially returned a verdict of not guilty, relief rippled through the courtroom. But the verdict was overturned under pressure, and Nurse was condemned. Her death shook Salem. If someone like Rebecca Nurse could be executed, then no one was safe. Yet even this realization did not halt the proceedings. Instead, it fueled a sense of desperation. The logic of the trials demanded consistency, not mercy. August brought another wave of executions. Among them was George Burroughs, a former minister accused of leading a satanic conspiracy. His trial was riddled with contradictions, yet he was convicted. On the gallows, he recited the Lord's Prayer flawlessly, something witches were believed incapable of doing. For a moment, the crowd wavered, but the execution went forward. John Proctor was also among those hanged in August. A prosperous farmer and outspoken critic of the trials, Proctor had challenged the credibility of the afflicted girls. His resistance made him a target. His death sent a chilling message. Dissent would not be tolerated. The most brutal death occurred in September. Giles Corey, an elderly man, refused to enter a plea, knowing that doing so would result in the forfeiture of his property. Under the law, those who refused to plead could be subjected to pressing. Corey was laid on the ground, a board placed on his chest, and stones added one by one until he was crushed to death. His silence was an act of defiance, but it came at an unbearable cost. By this point, Salem was unraveling. Jails were overcrowded, families destitute, and fear pervasive. Accusations had spread beyond the village, implicating people in surrounding towns. The scale of the crisis was becoming impossible to ignore. Crucially, the hysteria began to touch those in positions of power. When rumors surfaced that the governor's own wife had been accused, the trials took on a new urgency. The threat was no longer abstract or distant. It was personal. Doubts that had been whispered now grew louder. Ministers expressed concern about the use of spectral evidence. Some judges grew uneasy with the number of executions and the nature of the testimony. Public confidence in the proceedings began to erode. The breaking point came not from a single revelation, but from the accumulation of horror. The bodies hanging from the gallows, the elderly crushed under stones, the children left orphaned. These images lingered. The cost of the trials was no longer theoretical. It was visible, undeniable, and deeply troubling. Governor William Phipps intervened. He suspended the court responsible for the witch trials and prohibited further arrests based on spectral evidence. Without that form of testimony, the foundation of the prosecutions collapsed. Those still imprisoned were gradually released. Many had spent months in filthy, overcrowded jails. Some had lost family members, property, or health. few would never recover. The execution stopped, but the damage was done. Salem was left to reckon with what it had become. The breaking point revealed the fragility of justice when fear is allowed to govern. The same mechanisms that had enabled the trials now made their excesses undeniable. Authority, once unquestioned, was forced to confront its own fallibility. The gallows were dismantled, but the memory of them remained. The silence that followed the executions was heavy with grief and shame. The community that had once believed itself divinely protected now faced the realization that it had committed profound injustice. Salem had reached the end of its terror, but not the end of its story. What remained was the long and painful process of reckoning, a process that would unfold over years, even decades, as the colony struggled to understand how fear had triumphed over reason and compassion. When the executions ceased in the autumn of 1692, Salem did not return to normal. There was no clear moment of relief, no collective sigh of release. Instead, the village entered a period of stunned quiet, as though awakening from a fever dream whose consequences could not yet be measured. The terror had ended abruptly, but the wounds it left behind were deep, complicated, and slow to heal. Governor William Phipps's intervention marked the formal end of the witch trials as they had been conducted. The special court that had relied so heavily on spectral evidence was dissolved. In its place, a new legal approach emerged, one far more cautious and restrained. Spectral evidence was disallowed. Confessions extracted under pressure were viewed with skepticism. Without these tools, prosecutors found themselves unable to build cases. Those still awaiting trial were acquitted or released. Some walked free after months of imprisonment, emerging gaunt, weakened, and permanently altered by their ordeal. Others never lived to see their freedom. Disease had spread through the jails, claiming lives that would later be counted among the dead of the witch trials, though they never faced execution. Families attempted to reunite, but the damage ran deep. Children had testified against parents. Neighbors had accused neighbors. Trust had been shattered, and silence often replaced reconciliation. People avoided speaking openly about what had happened, unsure whether regret or justification would bring greater pain. For the accused who survived, life did not simply resume. Many returned to homes that had been confiscated or fallen into ruin. Livestock had been sold, land seized, debts accumulated. Widows and orphans struggled to survive in a community that had once condemned them. Even those officially cleared of wrongdoing carried the stain of suspicion. The legal system itself faced scrutiny. Judges who had presided over the trials now confronted the reality that their decisions had resulted in the deaths of innocent people. Some responded with defensiveness, arguing that they had acted according to the knowledge and beliefs of the time. Others were less certain. Over the following years, a slow and uneven process of acknowledgement began. Public days of fasting and prayer were declared, intended as acts of collective repentance. Ministers preached sermons expressing sorrow and urging humility. These gestures, while symbolic, reflected a growing awareness that the trials had gone terribly wrong. One of the most significant moments of reckoning came when a former judge publicly confessed error. He stood before his congregation and acknowledged his role in the trials, expressing remorse for the innocent lives lost. This act was remarkable in a culture that prized authority and certainty. It marked a shift toward accountability, however incomplete. Legislative action followed. Convictions were overturned, and the legal status of the accused was restored. In some cases, financial compensation was awarded to surviving family members. These payments were modest and could not undo the suffering endured, but they represented an official acknowledgement of injustice. Yet the process was far from comprehensive. Not all convictions were immediately reversed. Not all families received compensation. Some names remained tarnished for generations. The colony's efforts to repair the damage were constrained by political hesitation, limited resources, and lingering discomfort with fully confronting the past. Culturally, the trials left a lasting imprint. The events of 1692 became a reference point in sermons, legal discussions, and private reflections. They were invoked as warnings against excess, pride, and blind zeal. At the same time, there was an effort to distance the present from the past, to frame the trials as an aberration rather than a product of enduring beliefs. This tension between remembering and forgetting defined Salem's long reckoning. On one hand, there was shame and sorrow. On the other, there was a desire to move on, to reassert moral stability. The trials were both acknowledged and minimized, their lessons absorbed unevenly. For the descendants of the accused, the legacy was personal. Family histories were shaped by loss, exile, and stigma. Stories were passed down, sometimes quietly, sometimes with anger. The trauma of the trials did not end with the executions. It echoed across generations. The legal ramifications extended beyond Salem. The colony became more cautious in future prosecutions, particularly those involving supernatural claims. Standards of evidence evolved, influenced in part by the recognition that the courts had failed catastrophically. While belief in witchcraft did not vanish overnight, its power to command legal authority diminished. The trials also prompted broader reflection on the relationship between religion and law. The dangers of allowing theological certainty to dictate legal outcomes became more apparent. While Puritanism remained dominant, there was a gradual shift toward greater separation between spiritual judgment and civic authority. Despite these changes, the memory of Salem remained uneasy. It was a story that resisted simple explanation or closure. It challenged comforting narratives about moral clarity and divine guidance. It forced a confrontation with the capacity for injustice within even the most devout communities. Over time, Salem would become synonymous with the trials themselves. The village's name, once associated with faith and industry, became a symbol of hysteria and persecution. This transformation was not immediate, but it was enduring. The end of the trials did not bring redemption. It brought questions. How had so many people participated? Why had doubt been so dangerous? What safeguards had failed and which had never existed at all? These questions lingered, shaping how later generations understood authority, evidence, and fear. Salem became a cautionary tale, not because it was unique, but because it revealed something universal about human behavior under pressure. The long reckoning of Salem was not a single event, but an ongoing process, a struggle to reconcile belief with responsibility, faith with humility, and justice with memory. It was a reckoning that would never be fully complete, but one that would continue to inform how societies understand the cost of certainty unchecked by compassion. The Salem witch trials were not simply a historical curiosity. They were a study in human psychology, social dynamics, and the perils of unchecked authority. They revealed how fear can override reason, how belief can become weaponized, and how ordinary communities can commit extraordinary injustice when safeguards collapse. Understanding these lessons is essential, not only for interpreting the past, but for recognizing the conditions under which similar tragedies might recur. At its core, the Salem crisis illustrates the dangers of mass hysteria, Panic spread quickly, fueled by religious fervor, social tension, and the theatrical evidence presented in court. The afflicted girl's fits, initially private disturbances, became public performances, magnified by communal anxiety. Once the pattern of accusation was established, individuals were quick to join the chorus, whether motivated by genuine belief, fear for personal safety, or the opportunity to settle old grievances. The hysteria fed on itself, creating a feedback loop in which suspicion and accusation were mutually reinforcing. The trials also demonstrate the catastrophic consequences of relying on faulty or untestable evidence. Spectral evidence, a vision or dream that could not be corroborated, was accepted as fact. Physical examinations searching for devil's marks treated natural blemishes and scars as criminal proof. Confessions were coerced, often through psychological or physical pressure, and those confessions were then used to implicate others. In this system, innocence offered little protection. The mechanism of accusation itself became justification for further punishment. Social dynamics amplified the peril. Salem was a community rife with division, between factions supporting or opposing the minister, between wealthy landowners and struggling families, between men and women, the young and the old. Personal vendettas, long-standing resentments, and disputes over property were easily reframed in moral and spiritual terms. In effect, the witch trials became a socially sanctioned method of settling scores. Ordinary interpersonal conflicts were transformed into matters of cosmic importance, creating moral urgency for actions that would otherwise have seemed unthinkable. Authority played a decisive role. Ministers, magistrates, and judges lent legitimacy to the claims of the afflicted girls. Their validation made denial dangerous and compliance obligatory. Once legal and religious authority endorsed the possibility of witchcraft, ordinary people felt compelled to act in ways that violated their conscience. Salem demonstrates how institutional endorsement of fear can transform communal panic into sanctioned violence. The trials also illustrate the fragility of justice when due process is abandoned. The accused had no counsel, limited ability to defend themselves, and no means to challenge evidence derived from visions or fits. Presumption of innocence, now a cornerstone of legal systems, was absent. Courts relied on spectacles of suffering and emotion rather than rational inquiry. In Salem, the machinery of law became an instrument of terror, and the appearance of legitimacy masked profound injustice. Yet the story of Salem is not solely one of victimhood. It also highlights human resilience and the capacity for reflection. In the aftermath of the trials, the community struggled to repair the damage. Families sought restitution, clergy admitted error, and some judges expressed remorse. Over time, legal standards were reconsidered, and protections against similar abuses were strengthened. While the process was incomplete and imperfect, it demonstrated the possibility of acknowledgement, correction, and learning from mistakes. The Salem witch trials are also a reminder of the complex interplay between belief and morality. The Puritans acted according to deeply held convictions, convinced that they were defending God's will. Yet, acting in accordance with conscience does not immunize one from error. Moral certainty, untempered by skepticism or reflection, can become destructive. Salem teaches that vigilance against evil must be balanced by safeguards, reason, and empathy. Importantly, the trials underscore the enduring consequences of social exclusion. Those most vulnerable, women without male protectors, the poor, the elderly, and outsiders like Tituba, were disproportionately targeted. Fear, and suspicion often fall hardest on those with the least social power. Understanding the social hierarchies of Salem helps explain why accusations followed predictable patterns and why injustice could spread so rapidly. Finally, the trials serve as a cautionary tale for all societies. They demonstrate how quickly ordinary citizens can participate in extraordinary wrongdoing when institutions fail, fear dominates, and belief is elevated above evidence. Salem is not a distant anomaly. It is a warning of what can happen whenever humans allow certainty to override inquiry, faith to overshadow compassion, and authority to suppress dissent. The lessons of Salem resonate far beyond the 17th century. They echo in modern episodes of mass panic, scapegoating, and moral crusades. They challenge communities to examine how fear is cultivated, how evidence is evaluated, and how the rights of the vulnerable are protected. They remind us that the same social, psychological, and institutional dynamics that allowed Salem to descend into hysteria remain present whenever humans confront uncertainty with rigidity, suspicion, and zeal. Centuries have passed since the events of 1692, yet Salem continues to resonate in the collective imagination. The village, once a quiet settlement on the edge of the Massachusetts wilderness, became a symbol of fear made tangible, of suspicion made law, and of belief made deadly. Its story endures not because of the specific details of the trials alone, but because of what those details reveal about the human condition. Our vulnerabilities, our passions, and our capacity for both justice and cruelty. The hangings, the crushing, the months of imprisonment, these were the outward, visible consequences. But the less tangible, more enduring effects were psychological and social. Families were fractured, communities were polarized, and a climate of mistrust persisted long after the courts closed. Children grew up in households scarred by accusations. Neighbors lived with suspicion, unsure who could be trusted. Entire generations inherited not only property disputes and grievances, but also the lingering memory of injustice and fear. Salem also left a cultural and moral imprint far beyond its physical boundaries. The events became a cautionary tale repeated in sermons, books, and eventually in schools and popular culture. It is invoked whenever societies confront moral panic, mass hysteria, or the dangers of untested authority. Salem's story reminds us that when fear is validated by institutions, it can become systemic, compelling ordinary people to act in ways they might otherwise consider unthinkable. Yet the trials were not only a story of failure. They were also a testament to human resilience and reflection. The surviving victims and their families pursued restitution, compensation, and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Community leaders and clergy expressed regret. Judges admitted errors. Even in the 17th century, there was recognition that human institutions could be flawed, and that corrective action, while imperfect, was necessary. These responses were early, though incomplete, gestures toward accountability, a recognition that society bears responsibility for the misdeeds it sanctions. Salem's enduring lesson is the tension between fear and reason, belief and evidence, authority and justice. The Puritans acted in accordance with their deepest convictions. Yet those convictions, combined with social fractures and institutional failures, produced tragedy. The events of 1692 demonstrate how quickly moral certainty can become moral catastrophe, and how easily a community can abandon fairness, skepticism, and mercy when it believes it is upholding divine or social order. The role of the afflicted girls, the marginalized, and the authority figures illustrates the complexity of culpability. No single person was solely responsible. Instead, responsibility was distributed across the community, the courts, and the social structures that validated fear. Ordinary citizens, acting under pressure and guided by religious, social, and legal norms, became instruments of persecution. In doing so, they revealed how ordinary life, when guided by rigid dogma and amplified fear, can produce extraordinary consequences. Today, Salem is a place of reflection. Museums and memorials commemorate the trials, the victims, and the lessons learned. Scholars, educators, and visitors confront the past not merely to recount events, but to examine the human behaviors and societal conditions that allowed injustice to flourish. Salem has become a mirror, reflecting the enduring questions of morality, justice, and human fallibility. The story of Salem also speaks to the universality of these dynamics. Hysteria, scapegoating, and moral panic are not confined to 17th century Massachusetts. They recur wherever fear dominates reason, where suspicion replaces evidence, and where social hierarchies amplify vulnerability. Salem reminds us that these forces are not distant curiosities, but persistent aspects of human society. Understanding the past is not only an academic exercise, it is a practical guide for avoiding repetition. Moreover, Salem emphasizes the importance of empathy, skepticism, and institutional accountability. The trials show that belief alone, no matter how sincere, is insufficient to safeguard justice. They underscore the necessity of legal safeguards, the presumption of innocence, and the careful evaluation of evidence. They highlight the dangers of unquestioned authority, the perils of conformity, and the cost of abandoning critical thought in favor of fear. Yet the story of Salem is also one of hope. Hope that communities can learn from their mistakes, that acknowledgement and restitution are possible, and that reflection can guide future action. The post-trial efforts to reverse convictions, compensate families, and publicly express remorse demonstrate that societies are capable of self-correction, even after profound error. In this way, Salem functions both as warning and guide. It warns of what happens when fear, belief, and authority collide unchecked. It guides through the example of reflection, restitution, and the eventual codification of better practices. Its legacy is not only in the horror of the trials, but also in the lessons they forced upon those who survived, those who bore witness, and those who came after. The village, once haunted by suspicion and accusation, now bears witness to the fragility and resilience of humanity. It reminds us that justice is not automatic, that morality must be tempered by reason, and that the price of certainty can be measured in human lives. Salem teaches that vigilance, inquiry, and compassion are essential in the face of fear. It teaches that societies must protect the vulnerable, question authority, and resist the allure of easy explanations for complex problems. Ultimately, the Salem witch trials endure not because they were extraordinary, but because they were deeply human. They reveal the ways in which fear can distort morality, how institutions can fail, and how ordinary individuals can be caught up in extraordinary consequences. They remind us that history is a teacher, that reflection is necessary, and that vigilance is the price of justice. And so, centuries later, Salem still speaks. Its story is carried in memory, in scholarship, in law, and in culture. It calls on us to confront the same questions the villagers faced in 1692. How do we distinguish truth from fear? How do we balance belief with evidence? How do we act justly when certainty tempts us toward cruelty? Salem's echoes remain. They remind us that vigilance, reflection, and compassion are not merely virtues. They are necessary defenses against the repetition of tragedy. And in that, the village endures not only as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to the enduring human capacity to learn, to reckon, and to strive for justice in an uncertain world. If you found this exploration of Salem compelling, take a moment to reflect on the lessons it offers, not just about history, but about human behavior, society, and the consequences of fear left unchecked. History is not static. It lives in our choices, in the way we confront prejudice, and in how we respond to injustice. By studying these moments, we gain perspective and the tools to recognize similar patterns in our own time. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss future deep dives into the stories that shape our world. Your engagement, whether through comments, likes, or sharing, helps us create content that not only informs but encourages thoughtful discussion. And if you have questions or perspectives about Salem or other historical events you'd like to see explored, leave them below. Your insights could guide our next video. History teaches us that understanding the past is essential for shaping a better future. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and above all, let the lessons of history inspire your own pursuit of justice, compassion, and critical reflection. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.